Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Hilary Inwood. I am the lead of environmental and sustainability education at OISE. I'm happy to work with people who are new to nature journaling or those who are experienced with it. I think there'll be something for everybody today. This is to help you connect with your colleagues in the Eco Schools program at the TDSB and help just keep you thinking a little bit about how we make the leap in environmental and sustainability education online. I'd also like to introduce you to Pam Miller. Pam is the instructional leader for Eco Schools. We're going to an acknowledgement to begin. With that in mind, Pam, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. And before we get started, as we're reading it, think about today and what the place that you're on means to you. We would like to acknowledge the sacred land on which Toronto operates. It has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Batoon First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. The meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have this opportunity to work in the community on this territory. Again, on Earth Day, how grateful we are that they have such wisdom about how to interact with the land and how to be great stewards. And let me introduce Hilary, if you don't know her already. She is an artist as well as an awesome educator. And I was just going to add, she's an amazing cook in the outdoors and an awesome canoe partner. I had a final chance since grade 13 to last year going on a canoe trip with her. And she brings this nature journaling wherever she goes, and it really is a great observation tool. So Hilary, without any further ado, let's start you off.
Thanks so much, Pam. Really happy to be with everybody today. I see so many names I recognize in the room with us today. So I can't imagine a better way to spend Earth Day, really. Well, shy of not having a pandemic right now. But being able to share it with amazing Eco Schools teachers like those who have joined us today is just an absolute pleasure. So thanks so much for joining in today. So we're going to hop right into it and talk a little bit about the benefits of nature journaling to begin. There's no doubt that there are lots of reasons to do nature journaling with students. There is great reasons to develop connection with other living beings. I'm hoping for those here, I don't have to convince you of that. I'm pretty sure I don't have to. But that notion of biophilia, that connection with other living beings, is a really important part of our journey with children, connecting them to learn to love nature, deepening their connections with nature. All of that helps to develop curiosity and mindfulness and wonder. There's no doubt that we can integrate different subject areas into this work, whether that's literacy or science or social studies, definitely an art component. And for those of you who know me, I love convincing others of the power of art to help shift people towards environmental sustainability. Certainly, practicing transferable learning skills is an important part of learning, working in nature journaling with students, whether that's observing, describing, comparing, classifying, and certainly it's a great way, all of these things, to develop children's creativity, which is an important 21st learning capability. We can also think of it as a real world skill that we're developing with them too. There are so many people who use different forms of journaling in the work that they do, and artists and scientists are just two of those. And the other piece I love about it is its flexibility. You can do nature journaling with anything. So at this time, when we find ourselves separated from our students, not being able to provide everybody with equitable access to materials or tools, students can work with whatever they've got on hand. And so I would say that's a great starting point to remind our students about. It doesn't matter what they're using. They can use pencils like the two illustrations down below. The one on the left is from Claire Walker-Leslie, who's an amazing nature journalist and artist. If you haven't been to her website, I can heartily recommend it. You can use magic markers like the one, or colored pencils like the student's journal on the right from the How to Teach Nature Journaling book. We'll give you references to some of these books as we get towards the end of the webinar today. And we need to encourage our students to think about journals as really a place to grow their skills. We are not looking for perfect artworks. We are not looking for perfect writing that goes along with it. These are ways to practice and deepen our skills as we go along. And let's not forget that we can add found materials to these as we want. So whether they're collecting small rocks or leaves, little branches, pieces of fur they might find on the ground. Any of that can go into a nature journal. So just encouraging children to think about the flexibility, and everybody's journal, especially these days working with our students online, they're all going to look a little bit different, and that's perfectly okay. In fact, I would argue that's in fact better, because it means that they're going to be very individual. Now, our first step in the process, and by the way, I was thinking about the 4 R's for 2 reasons. I wanted to counter this notion of returning to the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic that some people in our Ministry of Education and our larger political spheres would be encouraging these days. And the good news is that nature journaling helps to support all 3 of those. So it doesn't have to be seen as moving away from the basics, but in fact, helping to support and develop the basics. But it also connects to notions of environmental sustainability. So that's where our other 3 R's, recycling, reducing, reusing, can also be added to with 4 more R's today. And reconnecting with nature is the first one. So there's no doubt that some of our students can still access nature. We have not been told we have to stay inside like other places around the world right now. So getting outside is important. Now, I know it's been chilly so far, but there's lots of signs of spring that are happening. And getting students, giving them an excuse if that's what they need, or permission. Maybe they need a little bit of encouragement with some parents to get kids outside. If they can access nature in their backyard or in a local park, or maybe they've got some plant pots on their balcony, any way to get them outside, I think, is a good thing. We know that's good, reconnecting with nature for our physical health, to get us out and engaging in embodied learning, but we know it's also really great for our mental health. And that's so important right now. I know that when I get that feeling of being stuck inside too much right now, the first thing I do is I head out for a run or a bicycle ride, being sure to keep my physical distance from those around me. But I know that I come back in feeling so much better and stronger and able to re-engage with work and family again after that. But if for those students who really can't get outside, and we know there's lots of them right now, ones who live in tall apartment buildings whose parents don't want them going in the elevator, for example, because I can't keep a proper social distance or physical distance, that getting them to engage with nature in different ways inside their homes is possible too. And that can still be the basis for a nature journal. So thinking about the nature that you can find in your home. And by the way, I do want to remind people that humans are part of nature. They're not separate from it. So if you have nothing else but just your family members to work from, that's perfectly fine. But we can also think a little bit about things that we might be able to find from a scavenger hunt in our home. So plants that we might already have inside our home. Seeds, if you think of all the seeds you can access as part of the food that you have already in your home. Or pets. Lots of people have pets of a whole wide variety that they can do. If you don't have any of those, you can start to grow your own if you need. And so you're seeing the photograph in this slide is actually a carrot top that had no greenery on it at all 2 weeks ago that I started to grow in my window. I don't even have a south-facing window. This is growing on an east-facing window right now, and I'm astounded at how fast it's growing just in a little bit of water. So you can encourage your students to save those vegetable ends and to actually start to grow them. If you're shy of nothing else, you know, just looking outside the window will provide some access to nature. That might just be the sky if you're at the top of a tall apartment building, but it can also be looking at birds that might be outside your window or trees. Today I was watching 2 squirrels have a great game of chase in one of the trees in my backyard. So there's lots of ways that we can access nature without actually being in it. And if you're really stuck, we know that there's wonderful nature photographs, illustrations, journals, videos that we can access in books online or more generally on the internet. So there shouldn't be any reasons why we can't in some way reconnect our students with nature, even in a time when we're spending a lot of time inside. Now, a couple of strategies you might be able to use in your online classroom for that. Encouraging students to find a sit spot. Sit spot is a common outdoor education technique that we can use to have children find a spot. You can call that a 1-minute field trip if you want, or if the students can take it, if they're a little older, maybe a 3-minute or a 5-minute field trip, to go and sit and observe one aspect of nature. As part of this, let's try to use all of your senses in that process. Certainly visual senses can be really useful, especially if you're far away from nature, for example, in an apartment building, but you might be able to pick up some of the sounds that those animals are making. If you have those plants inside your own places that you're using, you can also use touch and smell. So using all of those senses to examine those. 1 foot garden rule is not a bad way to go here, especially for those with very small backyards. There's a whole book dedicated to looking at 1 square foot of nature and all of the amazing and rich learning that can come out of that. Pam, you can probably speak to that. I think that's in the TVSB Professional Learning Library, that book.
Yes, absolutely. And just after this, Hilary, we'll just stop for a couple of quick questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We can focus on just one part of nature in terms of just looking at those clouds outside your window if that's all you have access to. But encouraging children to return to the same spot a few times each week will start to engage them in regular experiences. And it's those regular experiences that are going to ultimately develop a sense of connection. And I like to call it friendship with another living being. And that's what makes those emotional connections to nature that are so important as part of the nature journaling process. Pam, what questions do you want to raise?
One of the questions was about your carrots. Was it a bagged carrot? Was it an organic carrot? Is there any particular kind?
I was not able to get my usually naturally raised carrots at the supermarket recently. So these are regular old carrots. And these were not mini carrots. These are just the regular carrots. And I've just started a second one. This one had a tiny bit of yellow leaves on it when I started it that quickly turned green as soon as I put it into water. But I started one that had no greenery on it at all 2 days ago, and I'm shocked to see it starting to grow already. So I think carrots are still living when we're eating them, folks.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, celery is a great one. We've all done the one where the food dye goes up the cells. The fungal forest in my fridge is a great community of living beings.
There you go. Maybe time to clean that out, Pam. So our second step in the process here is once you've had an opportunity for students to find their ways to reconnect with nature, is to have them start to record nature. And this is really core to nature journaling, is starting to record what it is that we are observing and experiencing, what we can touch, what we can feel, what we can smell. Now, certainly creating images to capture what you've observed is important. Some people feel a little intimidated to make sketches, but I think one of the things we can really encourage our students is we're not looking for high quality artistic artworks. What we're looking for is just quick sketches of what it is that they're observing. And as part of that, they can absolutely use those cell phones they might have access to, whether it's their own or their parents', to take photographs of those as well. Because when we have photographs of what it is that we're observing, especially if it's a living thing like a squirrel or a bird, then all of a sudden we've got a stable image to work from for those sketches, which is so much easier. Having students start sentences like, I notice, I see, I smell, whatever those sensory words might be, can help them begin to describe their experience. It's great for literacy. It's great for all of their thinking that ties into oral and verbal communication. Certainly, we want them to use numbers to deepen their description too. And this is where the math component can start to be built, whether they're doing simple counts of how many leaves might be on their plants, whether they're starting to do some measuring in conventional or unconventional ways, whether they're starting to do some estimations of how high something was off the ground. All of that will help them to start to apply their numeracy skills in a whole variety of different ways. You can certainly have them add a temporal description, and many people consider this a basic for nature journaling, that you always write down the time and the date and maybe even the temperature of what you observed on any given day. And then finally, having them to look around the house for what tools they might be able to use for description. So that might be something like a standard measuring tool like a ruler. It could be a magnifying glass so they can zoom in. Angelique, just before we started today, was saying that she was using on her camera the ultra zoom capability to almost like a microscope, in fact, on your cell phone, which was such a great idea, Angelique. So any kind of tools that they can bring to help get them closer to or observe what it is that they're looking at in different ways makes perfect sense in this case. Andrea asked the question, would we get them going for a sit spot a bit before they start to record? And that's my personal recommendation. It's kind of intimidating sometimes to be observing when you're first looking at a new natural phenomenon to be recording simultaneously, but that does depend on the age of the student you're working with, to be fair. The younger the student, I'm going to say just get them to observe first for the first or second sit spot, and then get them to start the recording process after that. Now, there's lots of different record strategies that we can use in this case. We can talk about, having them zoom in or zoom out in terms of looking up closely or looking a little farther back. We can have them look at worm or bird viewpoints. That map I've posted for you on the right-hand side does exactly that, and particularly of value for those who might be living on a higher floor in an apartment building to do that mapping of nature in outside their front doors. But we can also have them do soundscapes. So again, students who can really only have access to a window, they can open up that window and start to listen to the sounds of nature over time. For those students who might be a little intimidated, it doesn't have to be a drawing. It could be something as simple as that center illustration, which is a rubbing, in fact, of a leaf. And that can be one way that you can get students starting to engage with image making, but done in a very non-intimidating or unintimidating way.
Just want to capture, a couple of people have their hand up. So Naomi, I think your hand is up.
So Angelique and I are teaching partners. So we were just messaging each other privately. The whole carrot growing, Angelique actually found a similar idea that we're hoping to do for our kindergarten kids with different vegetables, because we want to do slowly move to like a spring inquiry. We're trying to finish up like a coconut inquiry because one of our kids had brought a coconut before we left for March break. So I thought that was really cool because Angelique and I were like, we're so excited that somebody else had the idea.
I see another question actually just before you move forward, Hilary, which is the soundscape. And the soundscape is an amazing one. I think actually those of you who are in Outdoor Ed, one of the lessons I think that Michelle Blackie posted up to Learning from Home is all about those nature sounds. And so if you go, I'll find the link, but from the Outdoor Education Department, there's Learning from Home lessons, which includes a lesson plan for the soundscapes. Hilary, do you want to add any more to that?
Yeah, I do. I just want to say that, we all have on our phones a recording feature. You have to just go looking for what the app is that you've got built into your phone to record audio. So that's one way you can mechanically or digitally record it. But do know too that you can do that visually through a series of invented squiggles and circles and lines. You can start to capture what sounds look like on a piece of paper. So that's a really fun activity for one entry in a journal as well. Can you translate one of your senses into a second or a different kind of sense? And that's a great activity for children to explore. As we've gone through with recording, and that recording phase could last as short or as long as you want. I'm going to argue that it's great to have a number of entries so students have some choice over time. So even if you have them starting this week with making one entry of their their connections to nature, recording that over a couple of weeks, they're going to have some work that they could start to pull from for the research phase. So researching is our third R that we're going to talk about in terms of nature journaling today. This is a phase where they really can start to dig a little deeper into what it is that they're experiencing. And that can become something as simple as on those existing entries that they've already got is starting to add some questions to it. And those can begin with, I wonder about. So those 2 squirrels I saw this morning, I wonder where they're getting their food from right now. And I wonder where they're finding and how they find the food that they might have hidden last fall. So those are some of the types of questions that you can have students add in right away. You can be having students deepening their writing and image making through certainly asking key questions, the who, what, why, when type of questions, but also starting to answer those questions, either their own questions or questions that their classmates may have come up with, is a great way for them to share their own expertise, but also to really start to develop again those writing skills. We definitely want them to do some researching in terms of how to identify names, what kinds of types or phenomena that they're experiencing. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how to do that online in just a sec. And we want them to do some comparison. So that's why having multiple entries is really useful here. If you have 4 entries of recording what you saw in the sky over 3 or 4 different times in a week or over 2 weeks, then all of a sudden you've got some points of comparison to notice the changes or the growth that might be taking place. I think also Angelique had recommended earlier a book called On Looking, 11 Walks with Expert Eyes that the author Angela Horowitz, in fact, talks about walking through her neighborhood with different experts to get a different kind of lens on it. And there's no reasons why children can't do this themselves. They can take on, put that hat on of being a scientist, a biologist, an artist, a poet, a musician, and start to think about what these different roles would notice differently when it comes to nature. And I think that when you start to bring integrated learning into a learning journal, nature journal, then this is one of the ways they can do it, is think about it from those different perspectives. Don't hesitate to have them take on the persona of another living being as part of this. Imagining what a squirrel is looking at is very different than what a human is looking at when they look at a squirrel. So the multiple role play is a really useful little drama piece that you could bring in, but it's also a whole lot of fun to start to think about the perspectives of other living beings, human or more than human. Certainly some of those research strategies, on the internet, we've got tons of websites that can help children with this. There's no doubt about that. Whether that's the National Geographic ones, the Audubon sites, there's lots of them that can help provide information for children to deepen their learning about whatever part of nature that they are studying. There's lots of videos that can help in the same way. And I noticed that the Toronto Public Library has just made it easier to get an online membership over the last week. So having children have that membership to TPL, Toronto Public Library, so that they can pull books on whatever it is that they're studying to help to deepen their knowledge, as they don't have access to their school libraries right now, is really important. And finally, I do encourage them to reach out to experts online as well. I'm a good example of somebody, well, I'm not a biologist, I am an artist, and if I needed a little help on how to draw something, I'd be happy to provide that. So think about how they can, or you as a class, it doesn't even have to be them individually, as a class to be reaching out to experts online. We know everybody's online right now, so I think getting hold of experts is going to be maybe a little easier than it would have in the past. In your Google Classroom, you can absolutely have them do some research together by sharing entries, by having them do some of that comparing and contrasting in their journals as they go along, again, sharing their own expertise. They can potentially create plant timelines of growth over time. They can have a whole lot of fun doing some secret plant scavenger hunts. Can other students identify and locate examples in their own neighborhood of the same plant that one of the students in your class may have come up with? The reflecting stage is the last stage, and this is the one where it really helps to heighten their interpretive and creative skills, but it also helps them to make meaning, and this is a really important part. If we want learning to stick with students, if we want it to be truly authentic, it's got to mean something to them. So there's lots of different ways we can do that. Certainly sharing strategies so they can celebrate their learning with their family members, with other classmates, or with a small group as part of Google Classroom is a really important technique that can be used. We also want them, hopefully, to use their entries to inspire a wider variety of learning. And this is where you can really let integration fly across the curriculum. You could have them do what might have been a basic drawing about a butterfly that they saw in their garden and turn that into a poem. They can turn that into a story. They can create their own song about it. They can also certainly connect entries to a big idea. Just before I flip the slide, though, I just want to point out Janiyah Mead's work down below. This is her example of a nature journal that's presented as a graphic novel. And we know lots of students connect nicely to graphic novels and to comics. So to have students develop a couple of their entries into that journal that shows their learning in a more creative way is a fantastic way to go. We can also take that into big ideas. So the very first image that Pam showed in the title slide today was from artist Heidi Skiba. Heidi, interestingly not, is not a professional artist. She's got a fantastic website I can recommend that you look into, which is actually about her health challenges in life. But she likes to process ideas, and this happened to be about her renewal in life generally, but she did that by taking different images from nature and bringing those together in a new way. And this is where I had said earlier, I'm not worried about students doing high quality image making as part of their journals. Whether that's a photograph they're able to pull into a digital portfolio, whether it's a photograph they're able to print out and glue into a paper-based portfolio, it doesn't really matter, but it does allow them over time to go back and select images and text and pull them together in a unique and creative way. And this is where they're going to start to make meaning for themselves. That's so important. As part of Reflect Strategies, lots of great ideas in the How to Teach Nature Journaling book. This is from John Muir-Laws and Emily Ligren. We're going to tell you where to get a copy of this in just a minute for free. It's a fantastic book. I can't highly recommend it enough. And they've got all sorts of wonderful ideas that I've kind of supplemented and developed a little bit in this list on the right. Is it possible for them to develop a place-based play about the nature in their neighborhood? to develop that nature comic book or a treasure map talking about where they're finding nature either in their house or in their community? Could they develop sound maps, songs of the wild in their neighborhood? Could they even, over time, come together with a class field guide about what nature looks like during a pandemic in their homes? That can come together digitally via Google Classroom. So there's lots of great ideas here. Even having them go back and again, put on that hat of that squirrel that they've been looking and studying outside their window all week. Could they be writing and roll as the squirrel or as an earthworm? Lots of great ideas that you can use here, and lots of them are in this How to Teach Nature Journaling book. We've got other resources that we can share with you here as part of your thinking and developing your pedagogy around nature journaling. The California Native Plant Society one is online, as is the Smithsonian Guide Introduction to Nature Journaling. Claire Walker Leslie has a number of books, and I pulled this particular one not only because it's an absolutely beautiful book, but it's also available through the Toronto Public Library. Now, there is a bit of a waiting list for it right now, but hopefully within a week or two, you'll be able to get a copy of it. It's also available very inexpensively for about $7 from Kindle, so through Amazon. So lots of different ways you can do it. For the ones that are free, Pam has very kindly collected those together, and she's put them into a Google Drive for the TDSB, for Eco Schools. So the link is down below. Apologies that it's a very long link, but you'll be able to either pull out your camera and photograph it right now if you want easy access to those, or in a few days as we get the webinar processed, we can put it back up on the new link I'm going to share for you in a minute, where you can access the archive for all of these webinars. And then finally, Pam referenced earlier the TDSB Outdoor Ed at Home site, which is just an amazing collection of ideas of ways that we can get our students connected again to the great outdoors and to nature, both inside and outside. So a lot of those could be related to nature journaling in lots of different ways. And we've also got a list of apps for you here too. And these are really useful for students who might have that tree that they've been looking at in some depth and exploring, but aren't sure what kind of tree they might be doing. So they can try it with Leaf Snap or the My Nature Tree Guide. iNaturalist is a bit of a crowdsourcing for using experts and sort of citizen science approach to identifying specific trees, plants, animals, insects, all things from all over nature, which is amazing. Somebody had been asking earlier in the chat room about birds. Pam had put a link up to some of the Peterson guides. The Peterson guides are online, but there is a cost associated with them as an app. So look at the Merlin Bird ID or the Audubon birds as ones that are free for different members of the public. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different ones. Even for those students who might be picking up rocks in their neighborhood, there's a great app called Rockhound that you can help them to identify what kind of rock is there too. And they can write about that in their journal. This list, and in fact, a longer list, is in the Big Book of Nature Activities, if you happen to have access to that, or if you can order it online. Jacob Rodenberg is one of my favorite outdoor educators who works in Peterborough, and so I had to put a plug in for his book as part of this webinar. I just wanted to make a point of letting you know about the upcoming EE webinars that are coming down the pipe. Taking math online and outside. Pam is going to be leading next week, and very much inspired by Juliet Robertson's Messy Math books. So if you happen to have forgotten that in your classroom, you can get some ideas online with Pam next week. The Tackling Climate Change in the TDSB webinar is coming up with David Hucker-Budlowski, who's one of the central coordinating principals and the principal in charge of outdoor ed. So he's going to have some really interesting things to tell us about that. And if you're interested in doing some more gardening with children, but how to do that online, which is a bit of a trick, we're going to be having a collection of speakers coming up on May 12th that we'd love for you to attend as well. And then the second half of this workshop is going to happen in late May. And this is where we want you to bring back and have a bit of a curriculum share with us. We would love to see what you're able to accomplish with your students over the next month. So if you would like to participate, you're just going to email me in advance, let me, or Pam, either one, and just let us know that you have some examples of students' work to share. And all it requires is for your students to have photographed their journal pages or even given some text excerpts to share with us online as part of that. And that'll be a facilitated discussion to look at exemplars of students' works, but also talking about creative ways to pull those journals together into a really substantial learning piece too.
Great. Hilary, I think perhaps even we could entertain some of your own work in terms of our work, that as you're practicing and going along, show us a little bit of your evolution, how you used a spot or maybe some of the exercises like zoom in or zoom out or rubbings or things like that.
Okay, I've got homework for myself today too. Thank you, Pam. I'm happy to share too, but I really am interested in celebrating students' work as part of what's possible here. The link to past webinars is going to be here at the bottom of the page, and there's certainly more to come in May. We've got more to come in May. We've even got some that we're working on for scheduling for June as well. So please do join us. Come back and join us. These will be posted on the TDSB's EcoSchools website, as well as the OISE's ESE, Environmental and Sustainability Ed website. So as usual, we welcome anybody who wants to join us for these workshops. Somebody's asked the question about, will EcoSchools be sending another email? Yes. Once a month, they'll send an email. Thank you, Jen Vetter, for that. That announces the workshops. And there's also a new webpage on the EcoSchools website that not only lists the upcoming events, but it also lists the link to the archived webinars. We won't be sending out individual slides because there's so many people in the room today, but you can go back and pick up these slides by just simply revisiting the archived video that will be available. Give us 3 or 4 days to get that up.
And someone was asking about the free book. So John Muir Foundation offered the free journaling book. I found it through Twitter, and I have downloaded it and added it to the folder, the Google Drive. But if you go to his foundation page, you can actually see a couple of the webinars, and they give you a free, I guess, intro look into one of their nature journaling webinars, which I watched. It was quite nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, looking into Claire Walker-Leslie's website as well has some great ideas there as well. I've put the link back up on the screen right now in case you missed it in the first case. The TDSB resource folder on nature journaling has as many free resources as we could find to put in there. At this point, by the way, all you need to do is really just encourage your students to do their nature journaling on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be in a special journal book because many of them won't have access to that right now. In part 2 of this workshop or webinar in late May, I'll talk about how you can bring all those pieces of paper together into a creative and really lovely format for students. Just as we wrap up, you may have other questions and ideas to share, and we really encourage you to do that. Please do send us your suggestions for other webinars you might like to have or other ways that we can meet your needs within webinars. We have such large numbers. We had over 75 people at one point today in this webinar. It's hard to have everybody talking at the same time, but we'd love to know whether this met your learning needs. A huge thank you to everybody for attending, and we sincerely appreciate your time and your input today.